Hello everyone, I'm getting ready to do a demonstration of the slot stitch for you. The slot stitch looks like this. So when we look at it, there is two opposite folds of the fabric, which when they open, show another fabric coming through in a peekaboo effect. This stitch is placed on shirts or on special garments, well-made garments, I would say, because this is not a cheap stitch. It's a special treatment. Now, for this project, I'm going to need two swatches as two parts of a garment. And also, I am going to need another piece, which is 1.5 inch wide swatch fabric, so 3 swatches. So here I prepared my 3 swatches, 2 of them as part of the garment, and another swatch, long swatch like this. The width of this swatch is 1.5 inch. So here's how we do it. We take those 2 swatches, big swatches, and put them facing to each other, and we're going to pin 3/4 inch away from the edge of the fabric, which means my seam allowance is going to be 3/4 inch. So I pin exactly on that line. Now I am going to be stitching this stitch not with a regular stitch size, but with large stitches, number 5 stitches, basting stitch, in other words, because this is going to be a temporary stitch that later on will be removed. So we're at the sewing machine now, and I moved my stitch size from number 2 to number 4. That means I'm going to get basting stitches, large, long stitches. So let's stitch. Now, while I'm stitching, I don't need to do any secure stitching here, because again, as I mentioned before, this stitch is a temporary stitch and I'm going to remove it later. So then I'm going to simply stitch 3/4 inch seam allowance stitch and then continue with my treatment. Here, look at my stitch, please. Look how big my stitches are. And I let some threads hanging because I'm going to use them to pull and undo the stitch right here. So this is a temporary stitch. What I need to do with it is push the seam allowance open. This is the next step. Push the seam allowance open. Here's my small stitch, small piece, sorry. The small piece is going to go right side down on my wrong side of the fabric. Again, as you can see right now, my swatch is wrong side up. I am going to place my small piece right side down, just like this. And then I am going to pin in a way that while I'm stitching, this piece is not twisting sideways. So you're going to be stitching, pinning, sorry, like this first. And then I am pinning from the opposite side to prevent my swatch shifting sideways. Here. That's the way I want you to pin. Please note that my pins are kind of at the edges of the fabric because soon I'm going to start stitching from the right side in order for me not to step on the pins and break my needle, I kind of, instead of pinning like this, I am pinning just like this to show the tip just a bit, like that. Now, you see, the thing is that I am going to be applying my final stitches from the right side, where I can control the straightness of the stitch. Meaning, my intention is to stitch large 1/4 inch, one stitch on one side of the seam. In case you are not sure that you're going to be able to, let's say, stitch this evenly, you can even apply very, very light line right there, barely visible, and you can stitch on top of it. Or if you feel like you can stitch it straight, then you don't have to draft this line. Later on the machine, I will give you some other tips how to stitch this straight. So I am planning to stitch over these 2 lines right now. Back to the machine again. Now I am bringing my stitch number back to where it was before, because this stitch is a permanent stitch that I'm stitching right now. Now, when you look at the placement of the fabric, the line that I'm going to stitch on it, and where my presser foot is, as you noticed, my presser foot touches the seam line. When it touches the seam line, my needle is exactly the distance that I need to stitch. So my other tip for you to stitch this stitch straight without any lines would be, if you put the side of the presser foot right on the stitch, and you don't even look at the needle when you are stitching, you just look at the side of the presser foot sitting on the seam all the time, you will be stitching straight. So now, since this is a permanent stitch, I'm going to be secure stitching first. Now this stitch in the middle, the basting stitch, is going to be removed. So what I was telling you is this, you just grab one of the threads, and I am going to remove the number 5 stitch, because it's a big stitch. That's why it is not very hard to remove it. I have removed my stitch. In case you have a hard time, you simply can carefully cut the stitches with your seam ripper, but you should not cut the fabric. You see, I suspended both sides of the fabric, and when folded edges of the fabric as lips come up like that, open up, you can see my small swatch coming through from this side. I'm going to press it right now and finalize it. The last application for this stitch is to clean up the edges of the bottom narrow strip that I have. If I have an overlock machine, I will overlock this. If I don't have it, I can zigzag it. So this is my little Juki overlock machine that I overlocked the edge of the swatch at the bottom so it's clean, like this. Or else, if I don't have a serger or overlock machine available, then I'm going to be zigzagging it. Again, every home sewing machine has a zigzag feature on it. Here from the straight stitch, I put this lever to the zigzag sign right there. And also there is another change that I have to do. Again, from the straight stitch, it should go to zigzag. On my machine, it's looks like this. Look in your machine and you should be able to find it because it's right in front of you. Now, I'm going to be stitching. While you're stitching, make sure that the fabric at the bottom doesn't get caught up in the needle. So always double check to see if it's pushed away from the needle. So you don't have to stitch it, undo it and stitch it again. So pretty much I have done both of the stitches in here, so you can see you have a choice. If you have an overlock machine, you can finish it with overlock machine, both of them. If you don't have overlock machine, you can finish both sides with the zigzag stitch. Now all I have to do is simply press this, and that will be ending my demonstration for the slot stitch.